It had taken weeks of careful planning to arrange everything. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to be perfect, a fresh start after months of cold distance between us. I had picked Olivia's favorite restaurant, the one she had gushed about years ago, but never had the chance to revisit. I made sure we had a table by the window, offering a sweeping view of the city skyline. I even went the extra mile and arranged for the waiter to bring out her favorite bottle of wine, wrapped in a satin ribbon. She smiled as we sat down, that same radiant smile that once lit up my world. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that tonight might change things, that maybe, just maybe, we could fix whatever had been broken between us. I had come prepared. In my pocket was a delicate necklace, custom-made, with our wedding date engraved on the pendant. I had rehearsed a speech in my head, a heartfelt reminder of everything we had built together. But I wasn't the only one with a speech prepared. Halfway through dinner, just as the wine arrived, Olivia leaned forward. Her expression was unnervingly calm, her voice steady and cold. "I've been cheating on you for 2 years," she said, "and I'm leaving you." The words hung in the air like thick smoke, suffocating and inescapable. The glass in my hand trembled slightly, hovering midair as my brain scrambled to process what I had just heard. I searched her face for any hint of hesitation, any flicker of guilt or remorse. There was none. For a brief moment, rage and humiliation surged through me like wildfire. But instead of giving in to it, instead of breaking down or demanding answers, I did something that surprised even myself. I smiled. Raising my glass, I said, "To your new life." Her expression faltered, just for a second. She had expected tears, shouting, maybe even begging. She hadn't expected this. I took a sip of wine, savoring the moment. "Does he make you happy?" I asked, my voice calm. She shifted uncomfortably, looking away. "It's complicated." That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She thought she was upgrading. She believed she was walking away from something mundane, something predictable. But for the first time, doubt crept into her features. The waiter arrived with the dessert menu, blissfully unaware of the wreckage left in the wake of her confession. She waved him off, but I took the menu anyway. "I'll have the cheesecake," I said. "And a coffee." She stared at me, incredulous. "How can you act like this isn't a big deal?" "Because it isn't," I replied, setting the menu aside. "You've already made your decision. There's no point in me getting upset about it now." Inside, my heart was breaking, but I wasn't about to let her see that. When dessert arrived, I excused myself and stepped outside. The night air was cool against my skin, grounding me. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Nathan," I said when my lawyer picked up, "I need your help. Tonight." He didn't ask why. He just said, "I'll be ready in the morning." I made one more call. "Alan," I murmured into the phone. My private investigator had been on Olivia's trail for months. "It's happening." She admitted it. "I need everything we have, ready to go." "Already done," Alan replied without hesitation. I took a deep breath, letting the night settle over me. When I walked back into the restaurant, Olivia was on her phone, texting him. Her complicated new life. I slid back into my seat and looked at her. "How are you going to explain this to the kids?" For the first time that night, she looked genuinely unsure. I don't know," she said. Of course she didn't. She had planned this betrayal down to the last detail. But she hadn't thought about the consequences. I smiled to myself. She thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming. I sat back in my chair, stirring my coffee as Olivia scrolled through her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. She was texting him. I knew it. She didn't even have the decency to hide it anymore. I watched her, taking in every small detail. The way she held the phone protectively, the slight blush on her cheeks. The way she refused to meet my eyes. It was as if she had already erased me from her life. But she hadn't. Not yet. "How will you explain this to the kids?" I asked again, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated, her grip tightening around her phone. I'll figure it out." I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. "You'll figure it out." I repeated her words slowly, letting them sink in. "That's reassuring." She glared at me. "You don't have to make this harder than it already is." I smirked. "Harder for who, Olivia?" "You." Her silence was all the answer I needed. The waiter returned with the check. Olivia didn't reach for it. She didn't even make a move. I slid my credit card onto the tray. "This one's on me," I said, flashing a smile. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't trust my composure. You don't have to act so magnanimous, she muttered. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Magnanimous. That's a big word for someone who just admitted to cheating. Her face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. I signed the receipt and glanced at her one last time. You've given me a lot to think about tonight, I said lightly. I hope he was worth it. I stood, slipping my jacket over my shoulders, and walked toward the door. But I didn't leave. Instead, I waited. And right on cue, the restaurant door chimed as someone new stepped inside. I didn't need to look up. I already knew who it was. Her face went pale as she followed my gaze to the entrance. There he was. David. I turned back to Olivia, my voice calm but laced with purpose. You're not leaving just yet. Her head snapped toward me, panic flashing in her eyes. What did you do? She hissed. I smiled. I figured it was time for a proper introduction. After all, you've been seeing him for 2 years. It's only fair that I get to meet him. She froze, her mouth opening and closing, searching for the right words. But there were no words that could save her now. David spotted us and made his way over, his stride confident but cautious. He clearly didn't know what to expect. I stood up and extended a hand. David. He hesitated before shaking it, confusion flickering across his face. Hi. He glanced between me and Olivia. I wasn't expecting this. Neither was I said with a smirk. But life is full of surprises, isn't it? David pulled out a chair and sat down, still unsure of what was happening. Olivia, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Marcus, she began, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. This is unnecessary. I ignored her, pouring David a glass of wine. So, I said, pushing the glass toward him. You're the man my wife has been sneaking around with. How's that been going for you? His eyes widened, and he shot a nervous glance at Olivia. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said coolly. I know everything. The late-night meetings. The hotels. The lies. Trust me, David, I've done my homework. His face darkened. He turned to Olivia, his voice low and strained. You said you were going to tell him. She shook her head, lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't the time or place. On the contrary, I said, leaning back in my chair. This is the perfect time and place. You've been lying to both of us for years. It's time to get everything out in the open. The waiter approached our table, his cheerful demeanor faltering as he sensed the tension. I ordered another round of drinks. Nobody spoke. The silence was thick. Finally, I broke it. So, David, I said casually, what was it about Olivia that caught your attention? Her charm? Her beauty? Or maybe it was her ability to lie so convincingly. Marcus, stop, Olivia snapped, her composure slipping. But David was no longer looking at me. His gaze was locked onto Olivia, his expression shifting from confusion to something colder. I thought we were building something real, he muttered. You told me you were trapped in a loveless marriage. That he didn't care about you. I raised an eyebrow. Is that so? And yet, here we are, celebrating our anniversary. Doesn't seem very loveless to me. Olivia's face burned with humiliation. Her hands were shaking as she gripped her glass. I didn't think you'd actually show up, she mumbled, glaring at David. Well, I got a message saying you wanted to meet, he said, frowning. Was that not you? No, it wasn't, she snapped, her anger now directed at me. You set this up, didn't you? I shrugged, taking a sip of my wine. Consider it my anniversary gift to myself. David's expression darkened further. Tell me something, Olivia, he said slowly. How long has this really been going on? She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her napkin. 6 months. I smirked. Try 2 years. David's head jerked toward me. What? I leaned forward. You thought she was honest with you? That she wasn't lying to you the same way she lied to me? I shook my head. Come on, David. You're smarter than that. David's expression hardened as he turned back to Olivia. 2 years, he repeated, his voice rising. You told me 6 months. I didn't want to overwhelm you, she stammered. David pushed back his chair abruptly, his face filled with disbelief. You've been lying to both of us. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Welcome to my world. David shot one last look at Olivia before storming toward the exit. She turned to me, eyes blazing. What the hell is wrong with you? I smirked. Me? I'm not the one who destroyed our marriage, Olivia. I'm just cleaning up the mess. The waiter returned with the check. I handed him my card. Thank you for the excellent service, I said with a smile. Olivia sat there, seething. But she knew. She had lost. And I wasn't done yet. I stepped out of the restaurant into the cool night air, feeling something I hadn't expected. Relief. I had spent months, years, even, wondering if I was imagining things, second-guessing my instincts, trying to convince myself that Olivia was just going through a phase. But now, there was no more uncertainty, no more doubt. She had confessed. And now, the real game began. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, dialing the only number that mattered right now. "Alan," I said the moment he picked up. "Send everything." "Everything." His voice was calm, professional. "All of it," I confirmed. "The pictures, the texts, the hotel receipts, the recordings. I wanted in Olivia's inbox, David's inbox, and—" I paused, a smirk tugging at my lips. "A few of our mutual friends, too." Alan let out a low whistle. "Damn. You sure about this?" "Never been more sure of anything." "Consider it done." I hung up and stared out at the city skyline. Olivia was still inside, probably panicking, probably trying to figure out how to do damage control. But she wouldn't have time. Because by the time she walked out of that restaurant, the truth wouldn't be something she could bury anymore. It would be everywhere. I got home late that night, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and opened my laptop. I logged into the anonymous account Alan and I had set up weeks ago. The account had one purpose: to reveal the truth. No commentary, no embellishment, just cold, undeniable facts. As I uploaded the files, screenshots of her messages, timestamps of her lies, photos of her with David, I felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just certainty. She had made her choice. Now, she would face the consequences. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before the sun was even up. I ignored it at first. Let it ring. Let it buzz. Let her sweat. But then, I saw the name on the screen. Nathan, my lawyer. I picked up. "Morning." "Jesus, Marcus," he muttered. "You really went nuclear, didn't you?" I smirked. "That bad, huh?" "Oh, it's bad," he confirmed. "I assume you wanted this level of exposure?" "Absolutely." "Well, congratulations," Nathan said dryly. "Because Olivia's reputation is in flames. The video evidence is damning. The text messages? Brutal. She's being ripped apart in every group chat, every social media platform, every professional circle she's ever been in." I took a sip of my coffee, unbothered. "Good." Nathan sighed. "Listen, I assume you still want primary custody of the kids?" "That was never in question." "Then this will help," he admitted. "Judges don't look kindly on parents who carry out affairs this brazenly." "But Marcus," he hesitated. "But what?" "You need to be careful. You've already won in the court of public opinion. But don't let this turn into revenge for revenge's sake. Keep your eye on what matters: your kids, your future, your stability." I tapped my fingers against the table. "I hear you." "Good. Now get some rest. We have a long week ahead." By midday, the fallout had reached every corner of our world. Olivia had finally texted me. "Olivia, what the hell did you do?" I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. "Me. I told the truth." She responded instantly. "Olivia, you humiliated me." I smirked. "Me? No, Olivia. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." She didn't respond. By evening, mutual friends started reaching out. Some wanted details. Some were just checking in. A few, particularly the ones Olivia had manipulated over the years, sent quiet apologies, realizing they had believed her lies for far too long. The most satisfying part? David lost his job. Apparently, his law firm wasn't thrilled about one of their senior attorneys getting caught up in a very public cheating scandal, especially when it turned out he had been using company credit cards for hotel rooms. Poetic justice. As for Olivia, I heard through the grapevine that she had been placed on indefinite leave from her marketing firm. Companies don't like bad press, and her name was now very bad press. She had spent 2 years constructing a life outside of our marriage. In a single night, I had burned it to the ground. 2 days after the truth detonated across our social circles, Olivia showed up at the house. I heard her car pull into the driveway, but I didn't get up, didn't rush to the door. I just sat there at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, waiting. A few seconds later, a sharp knock echoed through the house. I finally stood, walking over at my own pace, and opened the door. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair in a messy ponytail. She wore the same coat she had left the restaurant in that night, but now it was wrinkled, like she had slept in it. "Marcus," she said, voice hoarse. I leaned against the doorframe. "Olivia." She swallowed, shifting on her feet. Can we talk? I tilted my head slightly. Didn't we already do that? She exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated. Not like this. For a second, I considered slamming the door in her face. But no, letting her squirm a little was far more satisfying. So I stepped aside. 5 minutes. She walked in cautiously, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. She wasn't. I followed her into the living room and crossed my arms, waiting. Go on. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly together. I don't know where to start, she admitted. I said nothing. After a moment, she let out a breath and looked up at me. You destroyed my life. I raised an eyebrow. I destroyed your life? Yes, she snapped. Marcus, my career is over. My reputation is ruined. People won't even look me in the eye. And David? I smirked. Oh, don't stop now. What about David? Her lips pressed together. He cut me off. I let out a low chuckle. So let me get this straight, I said, leaning forward. You cheated on me. You lied to my face for 2 years. And now, after losing everything you gambled this marriage for, you want what? Sympathy. She flinched. That's not what I owe. Then what do you want, Olivia? She hesitated, then took a shaky breath. The kids. The amusement drained from my face. She saw the shift immediately because she hurried to explain. Marcus, I know I made mistakes. Mistakes. I repeated slowly. You call this a mistake? Her voice wavered. I love them. For the first time, I felt my control slip. My fists clenched at my sides. You love them? I asked, my voice cold. You love them? I took a step forward, lowering my voice. Then where the hell was that love when you were sneaking around behind their father's back? When you were spending nights with David instead of tucking them in? When you were throwing away the family we built just so you could chase something exciting? Tears welled in her eyes. But I didn't care. Because she didn't love them, not in the way they deserved. If she did, she would have thought about how this would tear their world apart. If she did, she wouldn't be sitting here, only begging for them after she had lost everything else. I want shared custody, she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, I laughed. It wasn't planned, wasn't controlled, it just burst out of me, sharp and incredulous. Olivia, I said, still chuckling. You think you're getting shared custody? She stiffened. I'm their mother. And I'm their father. I shot back. The one who stayed. The one who didn't lie. The one who didn't walk out on his family for a guy who wouldn't even stand by you when things got hard. Her lower lip trembled. I made a mistake. No, Olivia, I said quietly. You made a choice. Silence. She stared at me, eyes wide, and for the first time since this entire mess began, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, sinking, genuine fear. Because she finally understood. She wasn't just losing me. She was losing them. And I wasn't going to let her change that. I stepped back, my voice steady. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Her breath hitched. Marcus, please. I shook my head. We're done here. And I turned away, leaving her sitting there, the weight of her own choices crushing down on her. That night, I met with Nathan. I want full custody, I told him. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Marcus, I get it. And trust me, after everything Olivia's done, you have a strong case. But courts favor shared custody whenever possible. I set my jaw. Not this time. Nathan exhaled. We need to prove she's unfit. I slid a thick folder across the desk. Then let's do that. He opened it, flipping through the contents. Screenshots. Photos. Bank statements. The records Alan had gathered over the past few months. Halfway through, he let out a low whistle. Damn. I nodded. She's not taking my kids, Nathan. He met my gaze, a small smirk tugging at his lips. Then let's make sure she doesn't. The custody battle lasted 6 weeks. It wasn't pretty. Olivia fought tooth and nail, crying in court, painting herself as the mother who just made a mistake. But the evidence? The evidence didn't lie. I had documentation of her absences. Records of her secret bank account, funneling money into hotel stays and luxury gifts, none of which were spent on the kids. I had witness statements from mutual friends who confirmed her priorities had not been on her family. And when the judge read through it all, when she looked at the pattern Olivia had built over the past 2 years, the verdict was clear. I got primary custody. She got visitation. Limited. Supervised. Her face was pale when the ruling was announced, her fingers digging into the edges of the table. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I had already won. That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he looked up at me sleepily. Dad? Yeah, but is Mom ever coming home? I swallowed hard, brushing his hair back. She'll visit, I said carefully. But this is home now. He nodded, nestling deeper into the blankets. Okay. And just like that, the war was over. Olivia had lost. And I? I had everything that mattered. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. Olivia's downfall had already begun the night I exposed her, but now it was accelerating at a speed she never saw coming. Word spread fast. Our mutual friends, many of whom she had relied on for support, weren't exactly lining up to defend her. Some distanced themselves quietly, while others made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her. She tried to keep her job, but the company wasn't interested in having a walking PR disaster on their payroll. First, they put her on leave. Then, 2 weeks later, she was officially let go. David was gone, too. I had heard from a former colleague of his that his law firm had uncovered some questionable expenses tied to company funds, hotel rooms, gifts, dinners. He was fired almost immediately. And as soon as he lost his job, he lost interest in Olivia. She had gambled everything, her marriage, her stability, her family, on a man who had thrown her away the second it got inconvenient. Poetic justice. One evening, about a month after the custody battle ended, I got a call from her sister, Sarah. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Marcus, she sighed the second I picked up. I don't know what to do with her. I leaned back in my chair. With Olivia? She's struggling, Sarah admitted. She can't find a job. She can't pay rent. She's barely eating. She's staying with our parents, but even they are at their wits' end. I didn't say anything. Sarah hesitated. She wants to talk to you. A dry laugh escaped me. Of course she does. She's not in a good place, Marcus. I pinched the bridge of my nose, exhaling slowly. Sarah, do you know how many times Olivia has called me since all this started? Sarah was quiet. Dozens, I continued. And every single time, it's the same thing. She's not sorry for what she did. She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry for the consequences. Sarah sighed. I know. Then you know why I'm not interested. She was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, she's not coming back from this, is she? No, I said simply. She's not. There was nothing left for Olivia to return to. The life she had destroyed? It wasn't waiting for her. It had moved on without her. 3 days later, she showed up at my house. I spotted her through the window before she even knocked. She looked small, hollow, a shell of the woman she used to be. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel anger when I looked at her. I felt nothing. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Marcus, she breathed, like she wasn't sure I would even open the door. I leaned against the frame. Olivia. She glanced past me, toward the house. Are the kids home? They're with friends, I replied. What do you want? She swallowed, her hands twisting together. I don't know where else to go. I arched a brow. That's not my problem. She flinched. I know. Her voice was soft, defeated. I messed up. I ruined everything. I didn't respond. She took a shaky breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I tilted my head. For what, exactly? She looked down. For lying. For hurting you. For hurting the kids. For throwing away something good because I was too selfish to see it. I studied her. She looked genuinely broken. A part of me had once dreamed of this moment, of seeing her crumble under the weight of her own choices. But standing here now, it didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. Because I was already past this. I had already won. I exhaled slowly. I don't forgive you, Olivia. Her eyes welled with tears, but she nodded. I understand. You don't, actually, I said calmly. Because if you did, you wouldn't be standing here hoping for something. You'd know there's nothing left. A tear slipped down her cheek. Will it always be like this? Yes. She let out a quiet sob, covering her mouth with her hand. I didn't comfort her. I didn't feel the need to. This was hers to carry. I stepped back, gripping the edge of the door. Goodbye, Olivia. Her eyes darted to mine, searching, but I didn't waver. I shut the door, locked it, and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. From what I heard through Sarah, Olivia stayed with her parents for a while, picking up temp jobs, trying to piece together some semblance of a life. But she never really recovered. Not socially, not professionally. She had burned every bridge she had. And I never looked back. Because my life, my real life, was just beginning. Months passed. Then a year. Life had settled into something better than I had ever imagined. I had full custody of the kids. The house was no longer haunted by memories of Olivia's betrayal. It was ours now, a home filled with warmth, laughter, and peace. I had poured my energy into being the best father I could be. Soccer games, school projects, bedtime stories. It was exhausting, but in the best possible way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. I didn't think much about dating. Not at first. But then Claire happened. I first met Claire at the local hardware store. I was struggling with a stubborn shelving unit in the aisle, trying to figure out why the hell none of the pieces were fitting together. Need a hand? I turned to see her standing there tall, confident, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. She had a casual ease about her, dressed in jeans and a paint-streaked t-shirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. I think this thing is missing parts, I muttered, shaking my head. She stepped closer, giving it a once-over. Nope, you're just overcomplicating it. Here. With a few quick adjustments, she snapped the pieces into place effortlessly. I stared. You do this often? She grinned. Let's just say I've had my fair share of frustrating furniture builds. I chuckled, extending a hand. Marcus. Claire, she replied, shaking it firmly. That should have been it. Just a passing moment between two strangers. But a week later, I ran into her again. Then again. And before I knew it, she had become a regular part of my days. Claire was different from Olivia in every way. She was down to earth, no nonsense, and had an easy way of making people feel comfortable. She never pried into my past, never pushed for details about Olivia or the divorce. But when I did open up on my own terms, she listened. Really, listened. She was great with the kids, too. My son adored her after she taught him how to throw a perfect spiral, and my daughter had officially declared her the coolest after she helped build a treehouse in the backyard. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Claire and I sat on the porch watching the stars. She took a sip of her beer, then turned to me. So, when's the last time you did something for yourself? I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She gestured vaguely. You're an amazing dad. You're running a business. You've got your life together. But what about you? What makes you happy? I hesitated. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I had an answer. Before, my life had revolved around holding my marriage together. Then, it had been about surviving the aftermath. But happiness, that was new territory. I don't know, I admitted. Claire tilted her head. Well, maybe we should fix that. It started small. She dragged me to a local art fair one weekend, then convinced me to sign up for a woodworking class when she found out I used to build furniture as a hobby. You need to get back into this, she told me, running a hand over a coffee table I had built from scratch. Seriously, Marcus. You've got talent. And just like that, something shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing. I was living. One night, after dinner, the kids were running around in the yard, chasing fireflies. Claire and I stood on the porch, side by side, watching them. She nudged me lightly. You ever think about what's next? I glanced at her. What do you mean? She shrugged. For you. For them. For us. I held her gaze, and I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of love. Not of trust. Not of moving forward. I reached for her hand, lacing my fingers through hers. Yeah, I said. I do. And for the first time in a long time, I knew, without a doubt, that the best part of my life was still ahead of me. Months passed. Then a year. What started as a cautious friendship with Claire had grown into something real, something solid. She was woven into the fabric of my life now, not just as someone I cared about, but as someone the kids loved too. They looked for her at dinner. They asked for her when they had a bad day. She was there for school projects, soccer games, and lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes in the kitchen. It was seamless. It was easy. It was everything my marriage to Olivia never was. And the best part? I didn't feel like I was walking on a tightrope, constantly waiting for the floor to collapse beneath me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just trying to hold things together. I was building something new. My business had taken off, too. What had started as a side project, selling handmade furniture out of my garage, had turned into something much bigger. Claire had been the one to push me to set up a website to market my work. And damn, she had been right. Orders started pouring in. Clients who appreciated craftsmanship, who wanted the personal touch. Before I knew it, I had rented out a proper workshop and was hiring help to keep up with demand. I wasn't just making furniture. I was making a life for myself. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of what I had built. One evening, as I was locking up the workshop, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Sarah, hey, Olivia wants to meet with you. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Me, why? Sarah, closure, I think. She says she needs to say some things. Face to face. I hesitated. Olivia had been nothing but a ghost in my life for the past year. Sure, she saw the kids on her scheduled visitations. But beyond that, we hadn't spoken. And I liked it that way. But something in me knew that if I didn't close this door myself, she'd always find a way to leave it cracked open. So I typed back. Me, fine. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. The park. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, staring off into the distance. She looked older, not in the way time does, but in the way regret does. When she saw me, she stood, smoothing her hands over her jeans. Hey, I gave a single nod. Olivia. She studied me for a long moment before sighing. You look good. I didn't return the sentiment. Instead, I sat down on the bench, waiting. You wanted to talk. So talk. She took a deep breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I said nothing. She glanced down. Not just for the affair. For all of it. For lying. For treating you like you were never enough. For taking our life for granted. I leaned back, crossing my arms. What do you want me to say, Olivia? She swallowed hard. Nothing. I needed you to know. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. Do you ever think about what we had? I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. No. She flinched. Not even the good times? I turned to look at her, my voice calm but firm. The good times don't erase what you did. And they sure as hell don't mean I owe you anything now. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. She hesitated, her fingers twisting together. I saw you with Claire the other day. I didn't respond. She's good for you, Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I can see it. And I know. I know I was never that for you. I exhaled slowly. No, you weren't. She looked down, nodding. I don't deserve forgiveness. I studied her for a moment. Then, finally, I said, no, you don't. She blinked, stunned by the bluntness of it. But I'm not angry anymore, I continued. I've moved on, Olivia. And you should too. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know how. I stood, dusting off my jeans. That's not my problem anymore. Her gaze lifted to mine, searching for something. But I had nothing left to give her. I had already given her everything, and she had thrown it away. Goodbye, Olivia. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something else. But she didn't. And I didn't wait for her to. I turned and walked away, my chest light, my mind clear. She was the past, and my future was waiting for me. That night, Claire found me out on the back porch, watching the sunset. She stepped beside me, bumping my shoulder lightly. You okay? I turned to her, really, seeing her, this woman who had walked into my life when I least expected it, who had never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. I reached for her hand, lacing our fingers together. Yeah, I said. And for the first time in years, I really meant it. 5 years had passed since that dinner. 5 years since Olivia shattered our marriage with 7 careless words. 5 years since I walked away from the wreckage, determined to build something better. And now? I had. The house was filled with warmth, the kind that lingers in the scent of home-cooked meals, and the sound of laughter echoing through the halls, and the quiet, unshakable presence of peace. The kids were thriving. My son had just made the varsity football team. My daughter was deep into art, sketching on every spare piece of paper she could find. They were happy. We were happy. And Claire? She had become more than just someone I loved. She was my partner. She had stood beside me as I rebuilt my life, never once trying to erase the scars but reminding me they didn't define me. And today, as she walked into the kitchen, barefoot, hair tied in a loose bun, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, I felt something deep in my chest. Something I had never truly felt before. Safe. She slid the cup onto the table in front of me, pressing a kiss to my temple. You're staring. I smirked. Can't help it. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Big day today, she reminded me, leaning against the counter. Are you ready? I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. As ready as I'll ever be. Because today, After years of growing my furniture business from the ground up, I was opening my first real showroom. And for the first time, my name, my work, was going to be on display for the world to see. The man I was 5 years ago wouldn't have believed it. He was too busy trying to hold on to something that was already lost. But the man I was now, he had learned that sometimes, losing everything was the best thing that could ever happen to you. Claire crossed the kitchen, wrapping her arms around my neck from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she murmured. I tilted my head, kissing her hand. "Couldn't have done it without you." She squeezed me gently. "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." I turned, meeting her gaze. And in that moment, I knew, without hesitation, without fear, that I wanted forever with this woman. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the small velvet box I had been carrying for weeks. Claire raised an eyebrow. "What?" I smirked. "Nothing. Not yet. But soon." Because this time, I wasn't making a choice out of desperation or obligation. I was making a choice out of love. And that made all the difference. That evening, as we walked hand in hand into the grand opening of my showroom, the kids running ahead, laughing, I took a deep breath, letting it all sink in. This was my life. Not the one Olivia had destroyed. Not the one I had settled for. But the one I had built. And I wouldn't change a damn thing.